Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2. So today we're going to be taking another look at the Craftworld Eldar, and apparently I did not record the last one properly, so this is a re-upload. Anyway, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about their advanced skills. We're also going to talk just very briefly about the changes to them. First of all, Spirit Stone targeting node, they're patching the game and they're rebalancing the Craftworld Eldar, because like I've said, they're too strong right now. I think this is the wrong way of going about it. What the Spirit Stone targeting node allowed them to do was stay at arm's reach against factions that were oppressive at close range, and that's kind of a necessary skill for them to be able to have because those factions are still capable of catching up to them and destroying them. In particular, I'm talking about the Orcs and the Tyranids, and to a lesser extent the Necrons, now that people have started realizing that their capital ship is supposed to be a shroud. So with the addition of the people using those particular sorts of fleets, it becomes more of a problem against them. The factions that needed the boost against the Craftworld Eldar were factions like, well, to a lesser extent, the Dark Eldar, because a lot of the Dark Eldar play them very, very one-dimensionally, but we're talking more along the lines of like Chaos, Adeptus Mechanicus, Adeptus Astartes, Imperial Navy, the Tau fleets. Those fleets suffer tremendously against the Craftworld Eldar, and it is not the Spirit Stone targeting node that is doing that, because when you're playing as the Craftworld Eldar, you don't fight those factions at long range. You fight all of them at close range. The reason that you do this is because their macro cannons are excellent, and the torpedoes work best if you're able to unleash a broadside of torpedoes from very, very close distances. We're talking about that minimum arming distance sort of thing, in which case you instantly blow up a ship and there's no real counter against it. So the factions that are really suffering against Craftworld Eldar are not the ones that are struggling to keep up with them as they sort of try to kite you. It's the ones that suffer from the overvalued macro cannons and torpedo combination that they're able to use. So I think that to a certain extent, the problem isn't going to be fixed by this, and we're just going to see an aggravation of some of the factions that are already a little bit difficult for these guys to handle becoming oppressive. So we'll have to see how it goes. In any event, let's take a look at the new skills and abilities that you unlock. First of all, you'll unlock Micro Warp Jump in your skills there. This is bad for the Craftworld Eldar, the reason being that they don't have a good flagship. You could take the Phoenix ship and put the Micro Warp Jump on there, but it's not a particularly good vessel, and this isn't really a great skill to have. I definitely do not recommend this one under normal circumstances. And the only reason, again, is that they don't have good battleships. Holofield Overload, this is really, really crap. It's 10 seconds of having a holofield as though you were moving at full speed. Just move at full speed, realistically speaking. It'll be much, much stronger than trying to use the holofield overload. You still take damage with this, unlike the Void Shield Overload. This is just a garbage ability. Wraithbone Reinforcement, this one has potential but is bad as implemented. It's 75 armor instead of the 83 that it probably is supposed to be, and it only lasts for 15 seconds. Yes, it is a large radius, but broadly speaking, you shouldn't be taking a lot of hits to the front of your ship anyway, and the only real weapon that honestly causes a lot of physical damage right now, or non-armor piercing damage right now, is macro cannons. So if you're sort of like facing the enemy and you're taking a lot of macro cannon shots, you could be avoiding a lot of those by continuing to stay in motion and keeping your holofields up. Now, this could potentially allow you to just sort of stand there and passively shoot at the side of an Imperial Navy ship from 4,500. You just pop on the Wraithbone Reinforcements, but then again, he's probably also going to have like armor-penetrating macros, in which case your Wraithbone Reinforcement does nothing. So it's kind of useless. The time that I think that it would be useful is if you could apply it during collisions, but then it says it does not apply against collisions. So it has a lot of potential where it could have been good, but it's just not. Next up is Maelstrom. This one's actually quite powerful. It creates a Maelstrom of psychic energy in a 2,500 unit radius at a maximum distance of 13,500. Anything without shields, Cotton Zone suffers 20 damage per second, ignoring armor. So this is a lot of damage potential, and it's one of the ways that you can really amp up the amount that you're dealing with this particular navy. And I've taken out just so many players where they carelessly use their big red button or whatever, end up caught in a Maelstrom and in a stasis bomb, and end up getting killed because of it. Now, because the Craftworld Eldar were overloaded in the good abilities without having to unlock them, this means that the bad abilities sort of come as unlocks, which is a little bit disappointing in some ways, but at the same time, it's not really to be taken lightly, the fact that you start off with the really good ones. Now, I like pairing the Stasis Bomb with Maelstrom. Maelstrom actually does come in really, really handy later on once you unlock it. Now, with the upgrades here, you first get the Dire Avenger Honor Guard. This makes it more likely that you're going to be able to decrew enemy ships, and this can be a useful tactic under certain circumstances. The 10% increase means that you're going to more consistently get the bonus damage that exists, which I think is like a 30% chance that you deal 2 extra damage when you do Warning Action or Lightning Strike. This isn't terrible, but it's not particularly great. The reason is that, typically speaking, you can't afford to go for a very big all-in boarding rush with the Craftworld Eldar. They just aren't really that great at it, because you, generally speaking, don't have enough hulls on the field with a high enough class of ship to make that super, super worthwhile. But it's not the worst in the world. You're only really behind by 1 or 2 ships of that class, of that cruiser tier. But it's not fantastic, and it's not really a strategy that they typically go for. Spirit Crystal Lenses, this only does a little bit of extra damage, but it's pretty nice to be able to do it. If you're going for a Pulsar strategy, this is definitely going to be something you absolutely have to take. So make sure that if you are thinking of going Pulsars, that you've unlocked Spirit Crystal Lenses first. The reason that this is so important for Pulsars is that shields are really the bane of your existence. In that particular case, you're definitely going to want to go for the Disruption Bomb. But if you can get Spirit Crystal Lenses and maybe a couple macro armed ships, it'll really, really help out with this one. Shrine to Ozarian, this is in the wrong faction. Plus 25 Bravery bonus is actually really, really powerful in this game. The only problem is that the Craftworld Eldar already start off with 25 Bravery, which means that their ships, generally speaking, don't mutiny. This is attached to the flagship, and that means that if your Admiral gets killed, then you lose the Bravery bonus from Shrine to Ozarian. However, the only time I see this faction mutiny is when their Admiral dies, so it really is not a good skill here. I definitely don't think this one's worth taking. Next up, Blessing of Vol. I think this is going to become more important now that they're getting rid of Spirit Stone targeting node. If we take a look at the factions that I was saying that we're worried about, it's things like the Orcs, it's things like the Necrons, and it's things like the Tyranids. Now, the Orcs are a problem because we're not going to be able to keep at 13,500 range and still attack them, which is kind of important to be able to do if we want to make it easier and safer to keep away from them. Generally speaking, they're going to have lots of thrusters, and they're probably also going to use the reload stance. This is going to make it very easy for them to catch up to you, and especially if they've got things like the tractor cannon, they're probably going to be able to catch up to you much more easily. The reason that the Blessing of Vol is kind of useful in that situation is because you'll at least be able to angle your ships such that they're firing at the nose cone of the enemy ships once they approach to within that 4,500 range, which is what they're trying to do. So while your ships are getting mauled at that sort of closer distance, if you can just barely avoid them ramming into you, you'll be able to unleash a lot of damage to the front of their ships because their ships have that really heavy armor to the front. One of the things I noticed when I was doing the kiting strategy in previous versions, or with the long-range one, is that while I'm generally chipping away at him, that 83 front armor is really saving him from a lot of damage. It's taking him a long time to die. So I have to keep kiting him for a very, very long period of time. With the Blessing of Vol, I won't have to do that for a very long period of time. I should be able to take out the front ships relatively easy because they're the ones that have probably sucked on a bunch of torpedoes and have died because of it. It's the ones after that, once he's sort of down a few ships, that become really, really irritating. And also Necrons, now they're becoming a little bit more canny. You're going to want to be able to focus down and kill their ships really, really quickly. Ship of the Dead grants an additional 3 troops to the Rally command effect. This skill can be used to recover control of drifting hulks, but has no effect on ships with no casualty troop state. This is kind of a tricky one to judge because it's really, really useful against a small number of players, but it's completely useless against everyone else. So generally speaking, this is going to be a difficult one to justify taking, but you're going to really miss not having it when you're in those rare states where you really wish you had it. 3 extra troops per rally is actually quite powerful, and being able to sort of pop that does allow you to do really well against things like the Imperials or the Space Marines or the Tyranids. It's one of the ones where if you could select it after the match started, I would say that it would be a lot more useful. So what I'm going to be taking in this instance is the Polarized Field, which is fairly basic, and I'm going to take Blessing of Vol. The other alternative is you take things like Blessing of Vol and the Spirit Crystal targeting lenses. That works out quite well. You could take any sort of combination depending on what your strategy is going to be, but I think that this is going to be the most reliably decent ones. For our fleet here, this is the version with the 3 Starfall Dragon ships and the 3 Prismatic Wraith ships. I personally still think that I would rather have the 5 Starfalls, just because I'm a fairly lazy player and I have bad micro. But this is a little bit more flexible. I just wanted to showcase another sort of variant on it, especially once they change it. I think that the ability to have those torpedoes and be a little bit more proactive in just wrecking your enemy is going to become a little bit more important. And you get 4 more torpedoes with the previous build, so with the 5 Starfall build. Because of that, I think that this is going to be a bit more of a fringe build. I think that's a little bit trickier to use and it's a little bit lower payoff, but I think that is also a little bit more flexible, so we'll see how that pans out in this instance. I think it's also pretty good against things like Necrons, where you can sort of chase after their capital ship. A lot of people right now are using a Shroud as their capital ship. Yeah, against the Imperial Navy, it's really unnecessary to have that extra flexibility. What we're just going to do is come in and just torpedo the ever-loving hell out of his ships, preferably. Hopefully he doesn't have too many Nova Cannons, but you never know. They're also buffing lances and stuff like that, which is going to be interesting because it's one of the few upgrades that might make the pulsars viable. It's doubling the crit rate of those sorts of weapons, but I'm not sure that that's enough to compel me to take them, since I'm still going to have to shred through people's shields. It could make it so that you take 3 of the Starfall and then the 2 of the ones with the lances. Pulsars, rather, so that you take them out with the Star Cannons and then you turn around and blow them apart with the other stuff just real quick and then get back out. I'm not really sure. So anyway, these 3 guys here, I'm going to go with running silent. And we're going to make them group 2. These guys here are going to be sort of going down the center. We're against Imperials. There's the real chance that he's taken Nova Cannons, and because he's potentially got Nova Cannons, I'm going to start off on the Brace for Impact stance. And we're just going to go ahead and hit ready up here. There's not a whole ton to take here. It's not a whole lot to think about as far as that goes. I'm also going to make sure that we're firing front with all our ships here, because I don't want these guys switching out to... They're going to switch to side fire because I'm going to screw that up, but... Alright, so I screwed up my thing a little bit because he typed at me, but whatever. Not going to make a huge difference. What we're going to target here, probably want to target his generators. His generators are pretty important for Imperial ships here. Could also go for the decks, but we're trying to kill them really quickly. Honestly, targeting doesn't matter tremendously in this matchup because hopefully you're just going to torpedo a ship, it'll instantly die, and then you don't have to worry about it. And it's coming from this guy. This guy's going to just, we're just going to up prioritize this to 1. And yeah, it's coming straight for these guys. I think we're going to try and avoid that recon. Just going to try and fight around these clouds here a little bit. I'm not getting the impression or the vibe that this guy's likely to have a lot of Nova Cannons here, because he probably could have fired them by now, but maybe he can't. I can't remember the range of that specifically. They're also upgrading the radius of these things, so just keep that in mind a little bit. It's not really a huge deal. I do wish the radius indicator was a little bit more clear sometimes, though. Okay, we want these guys stretched out like this here. These gas clouds are actually going to be a little bit advantageous to my opponent here, I think. This guy's, yeah, this is their capital. Could try to go in for a bombing run with those guys, but oh, he's identified me. Time to take the fight to him. Yeah, here's torpedoes. Probably not going to bother too much with these. There we go. Want this guy out of here a little bit. Gonna miss those last ones on the bottom there, but Actually missed more than I thought I was going to. Alright, let's see if we can get these torpedoes off. Got some of them. Oh, guys need to get out of here. Alright. Oops, I did not realize my general was there. Without, what's it called? Does actually have a little bit of that stuff that I was talking about. It's doing a pretty good job of keeping out of some of these torpedoes. I think we can get torpedoes off against this guy here. Or I can just, how long is this guy going to run for here? He's unfortunately running into some stuff that I don't want to deal with, actually. And I think we can also pop this here. Let's just do this. I'm too lazy to do good torpedoes here. Sort of running into these other torpedoes here as well, so that ended up working way better than I thought it was going to, honestly. I'm just going to fly into my own shit here. Nope, that thing's still actually alive. I thought that was dead. Alright, let's finish him off. Alright, and let's see if we can't get this guy with a bit of stuff here. Turn around and get this little slow guy. Get a little bit from each of those ships there. I was hoping to actually get this guy with some of those shots, but whatever. Let's go ahead and switch our stance here to the runic targeting. And I kind of think that we can go ahead and just do this now. That'll add some pretty decent damage per second output. Pretty much out of torpedoes here, unfortunately, but let's just do that. And there goes that guy. And in just a second here, this guy is going to mutiny into a wave of torpedoes. So that was a Craftworld Eldar game. As you can see, they are definitely overpowered. And like I said, this is not a matchup that they needed to fix the long-range capability on. I didn't really get that far away from his ships. I always was trying to get rid of all of these sort of close-range ones. That's weird. Like, it was much more important for me to destroy his close-range ships, his dauntlesses, his other things. I wasn't trying to run from them. I was trying to fight them wherever I could, get good angles and stuff like that. Being able to get rid of the Spirit Stone targeting node is going to do nothing as far as that matchup goes there, and it's a really easy matchup for the Craftworld Eldar. They just don't have the tools to deal with it, especially if they also want to have the tools to deal with things like the Orcs, if they want to have tools to deal with the Tyranids, if they want to have tools to deal... Well, they use the same tools against the Necrons, honestly. But if they want to be able to beat every kind of fleet here on this roster relatively evenly, they aren't going to be able to slug it out with the Craftworld Eldar, because the Craftworld Eldar as short-range brawlers are some of the better ones in the game there. It's really quite difficult for them to actually fight that. They're slow and unmaneuverable, so the torpedoes are fairly easy to hit against them, and if you get like a Dauntless with 8 torpedoes, it's dead. So it's just one of those sort of matchups where the changes that they're making aren't going to fix the bad matchups, and they're going to make the matchups where it's kind of close, because orcs or tyranids, they can be exciting matchups of you trying to keep them at exactly the right angle, them using their abilities to keep on top of you wherever they can, and making sure that whenever they do get on top of one of your ships, it dies immediately. That makes for relatively interesting gameplay for both factions in that both of you are capable of doing something. The ones where you're up against, say, the Imperial Navy, against the Adeptus Mechanicus, against Chaos, against Tau, those are the ones that you need to fix, and none of those are about the Eldar using long-range firepower against them. So I think the sort of change that they're going for isn't a good one, but we'll see how things pan out in any event. Hope you found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.